Welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for finding this out-of-the-way room. This is a special night. This is going to be great fun, and I'm glad you're here. Before we get started, a couple things. Let me ask you, if you would, I have to remember to do this myself, could you silence your cell phone, please, just so we don't get interrupted? I will too, I promise. And I also want to mention that tonight's reading is presented with support from the Department of English and the College of Arts and Sciences, for which we're very grateful. I'm Dr. Brent Spencer, the Director of the Creative Writing Program here at Creighton, and it's a great pleasure always to bring writers to campus, but it's especially great to bring these writers. I've been a big, big fan of theirs for many years, and it's the first time I've ever had a chance to meet them or to hear them read from their work, so I'm very excited. A couple of words. I'll introduce each writer before he or she reads, just so that you don't forget what I say about the other ones when it's time to read. Robert Boswell is going to read first. He is the author of 11 books, by my count, including the story collections Dancing in the Movies, Living to be 100, and his most recent collection, which is a title I would kill for, The Heyday of the Insensitive Bastards. You know what that book's about. We know those people. His novels include Crooked Hearts, my first introduction to his work, a wonderful, wonderful novel. Mystery Ride, followed by other wonderful novels, The Geography of Desire, Century's Sun, and American-Owned Love. His nonfiction book on the writing of fiction, called The Half-Known World, is a wonderful guide, one of the smartest guides to the writing of fiction that is out there. He's also the author of a book called What Men Call Treasure, The Search for Gold at Victoria Peak. This is a book about a real-life treasure hunt in New Mexico, co-written with David Schweidel. And that's not all. He's also the author of a cyberpunk novel called Virtual Death. Is this true? Yes. Virtual Death, published under the pseudonym Shale Aaron. He was a finalist for the Philip K. Dick Award. Any fans of cyber fiction, science fiction, speculative fiction know who he is. His play Tongues won the John Gassner Prize. This man does it all, as you can see. His stories have appeared in the New Yorker, Best American Short Stories, O. Henry Prize Stories, Pushcart Prize Stories, Best Stories from the South, Esquire, Plowshares, Harvard Review, Colorado Review, the list goes on and on. He's received a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship, actually more than one, the Guggenheim Fellowship, the Iowa School of Letters Award for Fiction, the Penn West Award for Fiction, the John Gassner Prize for Playwriting, and the best award of all. Those are great big awards, but this one I love, the Evil Companions Award. He shares the Cullen Chair in Creative Writing at the University of Houston with his wife, writer Antonya Nelson, who's also with us tonight. You'll hear more about her later. Just a couple of words about his work, his characters. What I love about Boswell's characters is that they cross the line. They make mistakes. They veer into figurative oncoming traffic. In other words, they are intensely and completely us. He writes about secrets, lies, and loss, about the vagaries of friendship, about threats to the family from without and from within, about the weight of history, personal history, family history, the history of the tribe, and about the events that take us by surprise, the ones that make us question who we are and what we have become. His characters learn life the hard way through the choices they make, choices that make and unmake them. The title of his wonderful first novel is Crooked Hearts, and there may be no greater description of the typical Boswell character, or for that matter, no greater description for any of us. So please welcome Robert Boswell. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you for that introduction. Thank
Thanks for having us here. This is a family reading, since my wife and I are both reading, and I thought, since it is, we have two kids. They're both grown now, and they grew up in a family where someone's always writing, and so they both have written a lot. And I thought it might be appropriate to start this reading by quoting a line that our daughter wrote when she was 9 years old. Her name is Jade. And when she was 9 years old, she decided to write a story, and it's got the better first line than anything I've ever written. The first line of her story was, as she set out on her great adventure, she decided to take with her courage, wisdom, and a skirt. How can you top that? You know? So I'm going to read the title story from the Heyday of the Insensitive Bastards. It's a long story. It's in 10 parts, and I'm just going to read not even all of the first part, just to give you a sense of it. The one thing I will tell you is that it's divided into 10 parts, and there are assignments. And what you discover as you go on is that this is someone writing from prison, and he's been given assignments. He's trying to get parole, and he's working with a parole officer and counselor to prove that he's right. The Heyday of the Insensitive Bastards. Assignment 1, Happier Time. As much as anything really happens, this really did. It was late spring. I was in that drifting age between the end of college, sophomore year, and the beginning of settling down, the penitentiary. And I had taken to the mountains, where my friend Cleet said the air was so thin you could skip the huffing and absorb it directly through your pores. Cleet was living out of a green VW van that had broken down at a scenic overlook a few miles outside the Colorado ski town of Apex. He had taken the tires off the van to keep it from being towed. Perched on the cliff, it looked primitive and vaguely prehistoric. The Greyhound driver pulled over for me. Don't get too close to the ledge, he warned. Evidently, I hadn't concealed the fact that I was stoned. Cleet sat on the metal railing, eating a combination of trail mix and alphabets from a plastic pouch. He was a big guy, with brown hair and bangs across his forehead, a ponytail in the back. His body had an imposing quality, not just because of his size, but owing to the confident way he moved through the world. I've got a kilo of shrooms, he said by way of greeting, leading me across the highway and up a muddy path. In the shade of pines, he moved a fallen branch and dug up a bag of psychedelic mushrooms. He kept them separate from the van in case some law officer decided to search his home. I spread my coat over the grass. The coat was blue and bulky but light, insulated by air, made of a petroleum product impossible to stain. It had so many pockets I'd forget about some for months at a time, only to discover an old joint, a dime bag, a novel I was halfway through. The coat dated back to my last visit home. I got distracted on the way, a 6-hour drive from the university, and arrived 3 months late. My parents still had my Christmas presents wrapped in elf and reindeer paper. The whole time I was there, they complained about their lousy holiday. As you know, I haven't seen them since. A person can only apologize so much. The coat was one of my presents. A man could walk across the Arctic in such a coat. It had become my organizing principle, and it was all the luggage I had. Cleet and I plopped our butts on it. I recommend this much, he said, and passed me a handful of mushrooms. It was a hot day, and we stretched out in the shade. Through the trees, we had a view of the highway, the beached van, and the green gorge beyond the railing. Cleet and I had been friends for decades. We first met when we were 7th graders. My mother had grown tired of driving me to school when the bus stop was just down the street. Cleet was on one knee when I arrived, his chin in his hand. Spermatozoa are living creatures, he said, and we make them. I did not know his name, and he didn't know mine. We'd seen each other at school, but we'd never spoken. They swim, he said. They wriggle. They seek. Is this where we catch the bus? I asked. That means we must have some sense of God in us, Cleet said. I feel it. He put his hand over his crotch. It's like a bright, tickling light. We've been friends ever since. They're kind of gritty, I said, referring to the mushrooms. Cleet shrugged. He had spent the morning in a wildlife center watching a film on lions. 1, they sleep 20 hours a day. 2, the females do the hunting while the males snooze. 3, when pursuing prey, they attack the smallest and slowest in the herd, the baby wildebeest, retarded zebra, gimpy antelope. Given this evidence, what do you think the movie was called? I pointed to a couple of girls in short pants bicycling past the lookout point, but Cleet couldn't be discouraged. When he got philosophical, there was no stopping him. Lion, the noble beast. He paused to let the irony sink in. Then I got to thinking how kings just lie around on their royal furniture and tax the peasants. Maybe lions are nobility after all. Cleet had never been what anyone would call a good student, but he could be specific in ways most of us couldn't. Take lime popsicles, he continued. Do they taste anything like actual limes? Have you been eating these all day? I asked. I sampled while I was harvesting. You pick these. They grow, he said, right out of the ground. Mushrooms can be poisonous, you know. I studied the remaining mushrooms in my hand, torn between the idea of a bargain high and the possibility of dying. I took a library book with me, Cleet assured me. They're perfectly safe. So, I said, eating another but chewing more slowly, you've got a library card. Everything we have, even the rain, comes from the earth, he replied, except for meteorites and certain toxic gases. He returned the bag to the hole and used the branch like a broom to disguise the topsoil. I know where there's a party, he said. We hiked down to the VW. The van had no side windows or seats in the back, just a long floorboard he had covered with foam rubber and shag carpet. I tossed in my coat. Cleet locked up and we headed toward town on foot. Where are the tires? I asked. Hidden. He needed $600 to rebuild the engine. He didn't have a job but was saving money anyway. Walking back and forth to town is good exercise, he said, which saves on doctor bills and money that would have gone toward gas if the van was running. We're making a profit just walking along, I said. Picking mushrooms saves on drugs and groceries. How much actual cash do you have? I asked. He stuck his hand in his pocket and counted the small wad of bills plus a few coins. $12.48, but this is a Buffalo nickel. I'm saving it. $12.43 then, I said. I felt the most inside our friendship when we walked together as we did that afternoon, making plans and bumping shoulders, eating magic mushrooms from our fists, hoping we wouldn't get poisoned. I've got about $50, I told him. I'd have more, but I gave this woman a necklace when I broke up with her. The one with the parrot, how was I supposed to know it wouldn't come when it's called? Parrots don't know what they're saying, Cleet said. They just copy sounds. Humans are the same. We talk in the vague hope of finding out what we mean. When we reached Apex, he showed me the library and a bakery that set out day-old pastries in the alley. Fires are good for forests, he said. I smelled the smoke then. The flames were 50 miles away, but the box canyon that held the town had a roof of smoke. It had a purifying odor. I began to feel tall and rubbery and ready for the next thing. We walked a long distance. At some point, it turned out to be evening. Stars swelled from the dark center of the sky to the toothed ridges of the mountains. All the heat fled the air, and I thought to ask, where are we going? Cleet pointed to a dark house up the hill. A girl named Val was dog-sitting for a family spending the summer in Scotland. It was her party. The house had a peaked roof and plank porch. The windows showed a waffling brightness like the memory of actual light. Some kind of Mary Chapin carpenter warbled inside, and I had a momentary fear of live music. Cleet didn't knock. The front room held maybe 20 candles. A boombox sat on a high table, its cord connected to an extension that trailed along the floor, out a window, and across the lawn to a neighbor's outlet. Cleet ejected the tape, which drew applause from the guys lounging on the furniture. I have Texas flood in my coat, I said. You're not wearing your coat, Cleet replied. He lifted tapes from the scatter on the table and held them next to a candle to read. I wandered into the kitchen. A bone-thin woman who turned out to be Val, the dog sitter and hostess, was mixing a drink by flashlight. Thirsty? She handed me the drink she was making. Whiskey and ice is my specialty, and it's all we've got left. She dipped into a plastic cooler for more ice. These glasses are real crystal, she added, but they're monogrammed. I'm afraid to sell them. It's a small town. I can sell them for you, I said. Nobody knows me. That's so sweet, she said. She'd spent the upkeep money the family had left on dope. Once the electricity was cut off, she sold the appliances. She was down to the blender and toaster oven. I have to keep the phone on for when they call from Dundee, she said. She had trained the dogs to bark into the receiver. I got screwed on the refrigerator. She had traded it to a guy at the bakery for a cooler of sandwiches. Never do business when you're hungry, she advised. Her mouth was small and almost circular, like a split cantaloupe. She noticed me studying her mouth and kissed me. Who are you, anyway? I told her I was Cleet's friend. Thank goodness, she said, I need his help. She took another crystal tumbler from the cupboard and filled it with whiskey. Cleet doesn't take ice for some reason. He doesn't want to get spoiled, I explained. She took the drink to Cleet and grabbed his arm, leading us to a room with wood paneling, leather furniture, and no windows, a den. People sat around in candlelight, studying a guy in a big chair who was staring out of eyes as distant and hollow as those tunnels that go under bodies of water. Val shone a flashlight on him. He didn't blink. What do we have here? Cleet asked. He knew the guy, whose name was Stu. A bunch of them had snorted PCP, but Stu had done twice as much as anyone else. Now he wasn't moving. Someone egged him on, Val said. She turned a nasty gaze at a guy sitting cross-legged on the couch. His head was narrow in the middle, like a partially imploded can. He spoke. From now on, he's not Stu, he's stewed. His laugh was sniggering and ratchet-like. Cleet asked Val for the name of the laughing man, as if he weren't standing right there. She answered with the single word, Barnett. Cleet leaned in next to me, but spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. We may have to teach that one a lesson, he said. Barnett quit laughing and drank from a tall glass of something green. Cleet addressed the entire room. Who, if anyone, knows what PCP is? A guy with a headband said he thought the active ingredient had something to do with the manufacture of fluorocarbons. None of us liked the sound of that. Cleet wanted the full list of Stu's symptoms. He's grown really quiet, the headband said. Pensive, I'd say, and he doesn't move. They all looked at Stu, but didn't know what they were seeing, as if they had entered a cult and weren't permitted to understand what was staring them in the face. an unconscious man with his eyes open, sitting upright and rigid in an armchair. Cleet wanted to know how long he'd been like this. Val checked her wrist. "Oh," she said, "can it really be 10 p.m.? "It's 10 to 12, I said, showing her. She had confused the hands on her watch. A murmur made its way around the room. Several people counted with their fingers. Stu had been comatose for 6 to 9 hours, depending on which of his fellow travelers you trusted. Knowing the time earned me credibility in that crowd, but it made me wonder how long Cleet and I had walked. I was certain the sun had been up when we started. Then I asked, "Is there any of that stuff left?" Barnett answered, stewed, sucked up the last of it, and licked the tray. "He doesn't smell so good," Cleet noted. "Is there a hospital in this town?" I asked, adding, "I'm new." "There's an on-call doctor," Val said. "He doesn't like this kind of thing, though." Cleet held a stubby candle right up to Stu's face, staring hard into the wanky eyes. Cleet said, "Wilt thou be made whole?" It got the ratchety laugh from Barnett, but Cleet was dead serious. One time in Oregon, he asked a highway patrolman who had pulled us over for driving without lights whether he didn't relish the dark world. We spent what they called a cautionary night in jail, but everyone was very nice to us. Stu made a sudden shuddering movement with the top half of his body. He raised one arm from the chair and held it aloft, pointing to our hostess, and said, Val, as if to encourage him, tugged on her short skirt, wiggling her butt against her leather chair. The place had great furniture. A tremor passed through Stu's arm and made his hand dance, as if he had discovered something miraculous or gotten electrocuted. His face contorted with the effort of speaking. "Val," he said at last. His eyes settled on Cleet. "Cluck, cluck, cluck, Cleet." "Cluck like a chicken," Barnett yelled. Cleet turned to him. "You should get down on your knees," he said. A girl in a tube top and cutoffs called out, "You insensitive bastards." We waited for her to follow up, but she just crossed her arms and pulled her feet onto the couch. "She can't be nuts," I said to Cleet. Stu's trembling finger indicated one person after another, moving around the room, naming the witnesses. He included the dogs, the big blonde retriever, Ruff, and the yappy white terrier, Reddy. When he came to me, who he didn't know from Adam, he said, "Keen." That's how I got this name I still use. To call it an alias is only technically correct. Eventually, I went off to explore. The candlelit house had wild, watery shadows on its walls, a fickle stream of bouncing light, and insistent waves of dark like scales of light on an actual stream. A breeze would agitate the candles, and the walls would become the wide, chopping sea. Human forms at the base of the wall, their heads upturned to watch the dreamy business, seemed to be praying. Some of them touched my shoulder or the soft places above my hips and said forgettable things about the brilliant rocking light. Later, I got hungry and found a jar of maraschino cherries in the cupboard. I filled my mouth, sweetness trickling down my throat. I thought I might hunt down a bed. In the stairway, I came across the body of a dead girl and swallowed one of the cherries whole. She lay on her back, her head higher than her feet, staring through an open skylight. There were no candles on the stairs. I had to let my eyes adjust. She was dressed in a green tube top and nothing else. But the body seemed innocent. Her skin as soft as the cherries that pressed against my tongue. The soles of her feet were black and a trickle of blood ran over one pale thigh. I couldn't decide whether she had fallen down the stairs or given up on the climb and taken a seat, only to die in the process. Her face may have been in moonlight, as it was impossibly white. One thing was clear, she was not supposed to be looked at like this. I unbuttoned my shirt and draped it over her. "Thanks," she said. I jumped back and tumbled down the stairs to the landing, hitting the back of my head. When I came to, she was gone and Cleet was kneeling beside me. Other people were stepping over my torso to go upstairs or come down. "These creatures have strangely human qualities," Cleet said, "like recuperating ghosts." He lifted his eyes to follow their movement. Even in this situation, he and I thought of these house squatters with a combination of condescension and ironic pride, owing to the van and our independent living skills. "How many people are at this shindig?" I asked. Cleet didn't answer. He waited for the landing to clear. Then he leaned close and whispered, "Wilt thou be made whole?" It was time to go home. Coming down from the mushrooms, I realized how high we had been and how long it would be before we were fully grounded. Along with that came the tedious desire to have never taken the stuff. With psychedelics, there was always a lingering descent, during which time you were not high but could not sleep or relax, like a hangover that begins while you're still drinking and spoils the whole evening. It comes with a bottoming out feeling. The designs you'd imagine and the new light that you'd shed on your life grow dim and dull and disappear as you nosedive. Your mind strains to retain some sense of what it was that had you smiling and optimistic, but you can't touch it. The dream of the high, as well as the high itself, vanishes, and the asphalt cracks remind you that you're no kid and less young with every plodding step. Hallucinating has taken you no closer to understanding what it is you need to do with your life. Cleet and I marched down the wide street to the heart of the little town. The bare streets and dark houses clucking disparagingly at us. In one window, beyond gauze curtains and orange light licked at the dark world, and dim figures crossed and recrossed the floor. A cold wind taunted the domestic bushes along the street and made my skin prickle and bump. I had lost my shirt to the approximately dead girl and longed for shelter, my nipples turning to squat little stones. "I should have brought my coat," I said, maybe 100 times. "We're at 10,000 feet, Cleet said, removing his shirt and handing it to me. "The nights are always cold." He was wearing a wife beater underneath. I buttoned up the shirt, which was several sizes too large for me. When we turned on Main to head out of town, the sleeves rippled like a swath of skin separating from my body. Morning arrived. The sun should have heated me up, but my body held tenaciously to the cold. We stopped at a diner on the highway and ate eggs. Cleet told me about the party as if I hadn't been there. Stu had come around enough to have several drinks and pass out. His essential movement is to seek unconsciousness, Cleet said. Our booth had bad springs, which put our heads close to our eggs, a handy convenience this morning. A scrambled bit of eggs escaped my mouth and hit the plate. Its brief contact with my palate had turned it an unnatural red, the color of maraschino cherries. "Do I look funny?" I asked Cleet. Cleet shrugged. "I've known you too long to say." The food sated something in me deeper than hunger. 3 walls of the diner were made of plate glass that needed cleaning, and we spent a long time watching a smeary light shift over the pines and aspen and wide stretches of high grass. The waitress had big eyes and narrow shoulders. Her name tag read Kale. She knew Cleet and would only talk in his ear, which made me a little paranoid. "I'd introduce you," he said, "but she doesn't like talking to strangers." "Is this really the right line of work for her?" I asked. She went from table to table, listening and nodding, pointing to the menu. She'd whisper to one person who'd speak to the others. "Her legs are nice," I said. "Every man in here is half or more in love with her," Cleet said. He got her to scrape leftover eggs onto our plates. "This guy's omelet has a weird spice," I said. Cleet forked a bite and savored it a moment. "Cigarette ash," he said. We stayed in the diner until the eggs and coffee had worn down my chill. Cleet paid the shy waitress, and we hit the pavement again, happy for the heat of the sun. He carried a white paper bag bearing the diner's logo, a possibly cross-eyed elk. Inside were packets of salt, pepper, ketchup, mustard, and non-dairy creamer. 20 minutes down the road, the peak of a tall black construction crane appeared. We watched it a long time before we got close enough to see the van. At the end of the crane's long metal wire was a big round magnet, which snapped onto the van's roof. Tireless and thoroughly defeated, the van rose up into the air. We joined the others, a crowd had gathered, in applause when it was set down on a flatbed truck. This was a terrible loss for us, but it was a great spectacle. "We can kiss that one goodbye," Cleet said. "My worldly possession is in there," I said. There was nothing to do but get the bag of mushrooms and hike back to Val's. This series of events, losing my coat and the drugs and other secrets and luxuries of my life, along with being given a new name by someone mumbling out of a coma, and encountering the not quite naked or dead girl to whom I gave the shirt off my back, combined in an almost scientific way to make me swear off drugs. I was 29 years old and wanted to change before I hit 30. Cleet and I developed a plan for me as we ambled back, a plan that would work all summer and beyond. Even after I left the mountain, it stuck. The plan had 4 parts. 1, I would not get a job. There's always some guy with a goatee and great weed to turn you on during a break, or some friendly braless girl tired of washing dishes who lights a joint or drops a line and offers to share. Work was a haven for drug users, and I couldn't risk it. 2, I'd use willpower and the help of friends who, even if high themselves, would discourage me from joining them. 3, the mushrooms, being organic and free, didn't count. 4, in order to be realistic and give the plan half a chance of working, I would stay drunk as much as possible. A few people, including you and the therapist they assigned to me when you had the flu, have since pointed out that as many people are done in by booze as by any drug or family of drugs. But Cleet and I saw it differently. Being drunk was a momentary lapse into happiness, like drifting off while listening to a song about sex. Whereas the drugs I craved were symphonies. They played at that low level just below the timbre of thought, a mattress of sound you could sleep on for days or a lifetime. Liquor relaxes the brain and lets the fool in you rise up, while the drugs I loved kept me still inside myself, permitting me to reside there in something like peace. That's a hard thing to give up, and it's easier if you're drunk. We moved in with Val and lived in the dog-sitting house 3 months. Without rehab or an arrest to keep me in line, I became keen and did no drugs. You asked for a happier time. That was it. Thank you.